Okay, so now we are here in zBrush. We have Pauline loaded, and the first thing I'm going to do before I start working on her anything, I'm going to go ahead and do some modifications here for things that I don't necessarily need. Like, for example, we're going to be doing clothing, so we do not need the belly button. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that. So let me zoom in here. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the size of my brush. And holding shift so that I can smooth, I'm just going to smooth up over her belly button. So her belly button is now kind of gone. I'm going to go ahead and go to geometry over here and go ahead and divide it. But before we do that, I'm going to go to modify topology, going to weld points, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide. Maybe 4 to 4 subdivisions. And since this is just our base here, we're not going to go back to low resolution. I'm going to delete the lower portion, the lower subdivision levels, and this is the way it's going to stay. So I'm going to do some more smoothing over here now. Make this area of where the belly button used to be kind of smooth. There we go. And anywhere you think you want to smooth out a little bit, you can go ahead and do. I think this is pretty good. This is a pretty good base right now. Don't really need to do anything. We're not going to be doing anything on the head for this project, so we're good to go. So let's get started over here. So we want to keep a copy of this always throughout our entire project. So we're going to go to Sub Tool. We're going to click Duplicate, and we're going to turn off. We'll highlight the top one, and we're going to turn off the duplicate layer. That way later on, as we do other parts of the outfit, we can always go back, duplicate, and continue using it and never lose the original. We'll always know whether our clothing is fitting the original body or not, and that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and start defining our clothing. So since the clothing we're making is kind of like a tunic, has a tunic underneath, and then some leather armor or clothing on top, we're going to go ahead and define the tunic part, since it's the bottom, the lowest part of the outfit. So I'm going to go ahead and notice that when you hold the control key, you are masking. Everything that becomes that dark black color is now masked. Okay, so I use this to basically draw the tunic on top of her body. So let's get our drawing size down to like 4, and let's begin to draw what we think this is going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and zoom around the neck area, and this tunic maybe has kind of like a little neck part, and it has a little split in the center. And something I forgot to do, and we're going to do right now before we keep going, is to activate symmetry. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click X, and you'll notice that by clicking X, I've activated the symmetry from left to right. Okay, so anything I do here will happen on the left. So now we can start drawing our tunic. So holding control, and I think this brush is too big. I'm going to go ahead and go to like a size 2, and now begin to define the shape of the tunic. So a split neck over here, we go up here, and then we go back towards the back of the neck. Now don't worry about being too, you can always clean these up as you go. So if you hold, while you're holding mask, if you hold Alt at the same time, then you're negative mask. So you can go ahead and clean up, and then you can continue to draw. Now, since these are polygons, in some areas it's not flowing in the direction you're drawing, so you're going to see some kind of fuzzies. Don't worry too much about that. That's going to get cleaned up as you go. And at this point, don't try to fill in the whole thing. just try to create the outline of what it is you want the tunic or clothing to go. So this is the back of the neck. And don't forget, all you do is you hold outside the model and click to turn it around. Zoom back out. Now obviously you can do all this dynamically, but I want you guys to see exactly what I'm doing. I don't want you to be guessing how I did something. So I'm going to be pressing pretty much all the icons all the time. So we're going to go over here to the arm. And you figure where you want the sleeve of the tunic to end. So I want the sleeve to kind of be somewhere, maybe like here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that in there. And then kind of go around her. The arm all the way around. And remember, just create a broad kind of edge. You don't have to fill in the whole thing. Just basically we're creating the edge of the sleeve. Connect this together over here. I think I drew somewhere on her leg, so I'm going to make sure I didn't do that. Yes, I did, so I'm going to go ahead and erase that real quick here. I'm going to frame her back in there. And now that we have the neck, we have the arms. Now I'm going to create the bottom over here where the tunic, it doesn't really end there, but that's as far as I can go, because then we have two legs, which the tunic wouldn't have. So I'm just going to go ahead and mask kind of like to here. And maybe I'll go to size 3 on the brush. There we go. Is kind of what I'm after at this point. So now that you have the outline pretty much prepared, we're going to raise the size of the brush maybe to like 8. And now we can go ahead and even bigger if you want. You might want to first do some edging. Make sure you get close away from those edge parts so you don't overlap them. And remember, you can clean this up afterwards. So don't get too crazy at the beginning. You just kind of fill in a broader area on the edge. That should be enough. And now we go to a bigger brush, like a 60. We're going to double the size. And just finish filling it up. Remember, you have symmetry, so you can just fill in the rest of this tunic form. And there we have it. There's our basic tunic under clothing or under tunic or whatever you want to call it. And after we extract this from the main body, we're going to make it longer by moving it and stretching it, stuff like that. But at this point, and if you want to make it easier, you can also you can actually go even lower here. Go to like a 6 and take this, which will probably make sense. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Go lower on the sides just to make it easier. And around the back. And we're going to be changing it later on so it would not have the split here in the back. So now that we have the shape of the tunic that we want to create, we're going to go down to polygroups, and we're going to click on this option down here that says from masking. And what that's going to do, that's going to create a separate polygroup based on how this model is masked. So basically the outfit here now has one polygroup, the rest is separate. You can see that if we load the polyframe part, we see pink on the arms and head and legs, and then we see the green in the center, which means this is one polygroup. We're going to turn that back off. So now I'm going to hold Control and Shift, and I'm going to click on the clothing part. That is going to hide everything else that we have here in this model. And when we're going to go to the masking option, over here, masking, and we're going to clear the mask. We no longer need that masked. Then we're going to go to geometry. This is where it gets a little bit complicated, where you have to switch through all these little tabs, but as you do it, you'll get used to it. So from masking, we'll go back to geometry. We're going to scroll down to the option for modify topology, and we're going to click on delete hidden. There. That means that everything else, the head, the arms, and the legs are now gone from this model, and they no longer exist on the model. So we can now that we are here in geometry, we're going to go to edge loop and go down to this option called panel loops. Now it's very important that you see this option here that says double. Make sure that that option is not active. And then we're going to set the thickness to 0.00, maybe 6, 0.006. We're going to raise the polish to 50. It's already set there to 50, so we're going to leave it at 50. Then we're going to go ahead and click on panel loops. And now we have created some thickness to this model. And we can see that it is there. Now maybe it's a little bit too thick. If you think it's a little bit too thick for being clothing, you can undo that. We can go back to the thickness and put 0.00, maybe half of what it was, 3. There, that's a little bit thinner. Looks more like cloth now. And since we have the polishing on, notice that the edge is kind of cleaned up a little bit. Okay, so our base tunic is kind of ready for us to work with. What I'm going to do is that this geometry is still the original geometry that was extracted from the original model, and for clothing it's just way too many polys and too much complication, too complicated. So we're gonna reduce this to something a little different with more symmetry for our type of work we're gonna do. So we're gonna use zRemesher for that. Okay, so here, let me get close over here so we can see what's happening over here. I'm going to go ahead and pick, to start off, I'm going to use 1 as our target polygon count. Make sure adaptive is on, and I'm going to leave the default at 50. Adaptive is going to try to adapt the new polygon topology to the shape of this model. The higher the adaptive size, the more it's going to try to keep this form. So you do want to have adaptive on, and I'm going to leave it at 50. I'm not using any curves, but if you wanted to, you could get really detailed here and use some curves to define how you want the topology. But I'm going to let zBrush figure that out in this case, because we really don't need too much definition at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and click zRemesh. Now the software is going to work for a few seconds. Notice there's a bar on top that's progressing. And when it's done, you will see something that looks like what I have on the screen. Notice how a lot of the areas got smoothed out, cleaner, some of the edges got rounded, and those are things we can work on, so I'm not too worried about it at this point. So there we have, now we have our base shape for this tunic. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring out, I'm going to select this guy down here, which is hidden, and I'm going to turn it back on. Make sure you keep the top selected. There we go. And now you can check to make sure there's no poke anywhere. But I mean, this is like an underclothing, so we still have to, there's going to be more clothing on top. So it's not critical, but you do want it to fit properly. So what we'll do is we'll go over to our inflate tool. We're going to pick inflate. We are going to lower the intensity to like 2. Raise the size to maybe 10. And just brush over the area where the poke through is happening. And there we no longer have any poking part. Okay, so now I want to reshape this tunic a little bit to make it more into a tunic. So the first thing I need to do is I need to lower the skirt and make it more hanging to like half through her thighs. So let's go over to our move tool. So we're going to come over here and go to move. We're going to raise the size around 50, something like so. And then we can begin to just kind of drag down. Don't worry about the poke through. We're going to fix that once we have a tunic shape that looks like a tunic. So we're just pulling these down slowly. And just take it as low or as high, leave it as high or as low as you want. This is all going to get smoothed, so don't worry about strange shapes or anything that doesn't look appropriate. Just keep going and bring it as low as you want. So now I'm going to just pull out here where her buns are coming through, and just push that out. And make the brush slightly smaller. Hold shift and smooth out the back area where we have this crease. And then we'll use move once again with a bigger brush and just kind of start bringing it back out once you have flattened down. Try to fix it a little bit so it's not so tight. Maybe add some tightening over here underneath the legs. There we go. That's good enough. Remember, this is clothing that's just flowing over the body past the waist, so it just kind of hangs down there. And we're going to have some leather panels on top, a leather belt. So let me frame this up. Maybe you want to give some gravity to the sleeves, so you could bring this, make the sleeves a little bit there, and maybe you don't want the sleeves so tight underneath the arms, so maybe pull that out some. If you don't want the vacuum look, you also want to bring out this part underneath on the back of the breast, because a tunic wouldn't be like vacuum in there, so kind of fill that in so that it's not so sucked in underneath on the back of the breast. And finally, I also want to work on the neck a little bit, because I don't want it to be like skin tight around her neck. So we can like pull it back some, pull it out to the sides and maybe to the front. Reshape it a little bit if you want, bring it lower over here. And there is our tunic base shape. Now, since we did a lot of pulling around over here, a lot of the polygons got all stretched out all over the place. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to close the subtool, go back to geometry, and we're going to go ahead and remesh it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a lower resolution. The last time I chose it was at 5, so this time I'm going to lower it, maybe 2. See, remesh. And here we have a much lower resolution model. Here we go. And we got a few little pokes here and there, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that with the inflation tool real quick. Now make sure that when you use inflate you have low intensity and you only use it very sparingly. Don't go crazy with it, because it will balloon your model very easily. So there, there's a little poke right here. And now we have created the base part of the tunic. Maybe I want to fix this bulge here a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce the intensity of smoothing. I'm going to go ahead and hold shift, and then up here reduce the intensity to maybe like 5, and then reduce the brush size and kind of smooth over here, kind of get that to look a little bit better. There we go, that looks kind of nice. And obviously later on we're going to give all of these folds and more shape. At this point we're laying down the base shapes. You do not want to detail it too early and then make something that will cover your details. So we're only going to detail it later on when we already have all the pieces of the armor attached, so that we only detail the areas that are visible. Okay, so this tunic is ready. And next what we'll do is we'll start modeling on top of the tunic, building all the pieces of leather armor that she's